Hello everyone, I am Angel Pamposa from 2AB Pulsai A, and I am assigned to tackle about the parsimony versus complexity trade-off. In this presentation, we will discuss about the trade-off between parsimony and complexity as a central to the selection of analytical strategies in political science and also in international relations. We will also discuss about the induction and the deduction, or the deductive or the inductive, which is the two different logics in political inquiry that has something to do with our topic, which is the, again, complexity versus, or the parsimony versus complexity trade-off. So we will define first what is the deductive and inductive logics in political analysis. So first, it was stated here, according to Dahl's book about the political analysis, A Critical Introduction, that inductive is an approach to political analysis which takes their starting point as the neutral and dispassionate assessment of empirical evidence, which means that a specific observations from what they seek to generate is more general or even universal theoretical propositions. And also, as Norman Blake suggests, induction also corresponds to a popular conception of the activities of scientists as persons who make careful observations, conduct experiments, rigorously analyze the data obtained, and hence produce new discoveries or theories. So this inductive logic is a statement, or more a statement of generalizable covering laws, which consist an existing set of empirical observation, and that is according to Hempel, 1994. It is also discussed or stated here that induction is a social science that associated with empiricism, or the privileging of evidence and observation over theory or the reason or intuition. Next is the deductive approach. Deductive approaches to political analysis are essentially a mirror of image of such a strategy. And later on, we will see more of it in figure 1.1 I have provided below this presentation. Deductive is an observation that they seek to derive or deduce testable propositions or hypotheses from pre-established facts or initial theoretical assumptions. It was also stated here in Dahl's book that the predictive hypotheses thereby formulated are subsequently exposed to rigorous empirical scrutiny. And according to the logic of Karl Popper's memorable terms, it is either the two, the conjecture or the refutation. It was also stated here that there is a good example of deductive logic, and that is Anthony Downs' influential in economic theory of democracy 1957 book. It was a series of simplifying theoretical assumptions which established the parameters of the model, which tackles that parties in democratic polities are analogous or firms in a profit-seeking economy, that both voters and political parties are rational in pursuit of their preferences. Here in figure 1.1 about the deductive and inductive logics and political analysis, it was clearly shown here the difference of deductive approach and inductive approach in terms of process. So through a process of logical theoretical deduction, Anthony Downs generates the prediction or hypothesis that in a first past the post two-party electoral system in which voters' preferences are normally distributed, the political parties will gravitate towards the preference of the median voter. U.S. Democrats and Republicans were also mentioned here in Robert Dahl's book, as it has been resuscitated to an account for similarly bipartisan conversions in countries such as Australia, Britain, Ireland, and New Zealand. And it was clearly shown here in the table that there is a big distinction between these two approaches. Deductive approach first is the theory or the supplying initial theoretical assumptions. Next is the predictive hypothesis and followed by a specific observations. While on the inductive approach, it was an empirical observation of a sample of the instances for which a governing law is sought. Next is the inductive generalization and followed by the theory as a statement of governing laws. So having established the distinctiveness of these two approaches, which are the inductive and deductive rationales in political research, we can now return to the trade-off between parsimony and complexity. Parsimony, complexity, and induction, it is an approach to social and political analysis as the aim, or essentially as the fit to a theoretical model of empirical data. Here, parsimony is most simply understood as getting value for one's variable. So in some sense, a better explanation, or certainly a more complete one, is one of which includes more variables. It is also stated here that the parsimonious explanation or model is one which includes as few variables as possible, yet which explains or offers the potential to explain. So this makes parsimony sound like a very attractive proposition and something to aspire to in one's theoretical models, who after all could possibly prefer a cumbersome and inelegant account saturated with variables of only marginal significance when presented with a simple, neat, and elegant alternative. So it was an example that may serve to indicate why people are interested in formulating a general theory of electoral success and failure in advanced liberal democratic policies. So this is a parsimonious model which is wholly inadequate in political spectrum. It was also noted here that for them, parsimony is a good thing. A plausible parsimonious explanation is to be preferred to a similarly plausible yet more involved alternative, which means that the choice of how many variables to incorporate were precisely to position one's model on the parsimony complexity axis or spectrum. So some relationships or data set in which behavioralists investigate avail themselves of more parsimonious explanatory models than others. Next up is the parsimony, complexity, and the deduction. The force of this remark becomes clear if we move from inductive logics of political analysis, which is being discussed earlier. Talks about the theoretical generalizations that are inferred from the evidence to deductive logics. And here, parsimony has rather different implications. And it is generally taken to refer to the theoretical assumptions upon which the process of theoretical deduction is premised. So opinions and styles of political analysis vary the most here in parsimony, complexity, and deduction. It was also notably noted here that rational choice theory and neo-realism has a connection with the new institutionalism in political science spectrum. It was also suggested here that parsimony in deductive approaches to political analysis is achieved at some price in terms of the realism of theoretical assumptions. And it is clearly stated here that it is only the predictive accuracy of analytical models that really counts, the extent to which one can legitimately claim to have explained political outcomes in terms of such models that depends on the use of credible assumptions. And to support this claim, abstraction and simplification makes prediction possible, but the greater the degree of abstraction and simplification, the less useful that prediction is likely to prove. Here in the second figure, the parsimony complexity trade-off, it was clearly highlighted the range and diversity of rationales underpinning strategies of political analysis in both inductive and deductive approach. At the parsimonious end of the spectrum, rationalist perspectives value the predictive capacity that comes with the choice of simplifying theoretical assumptions. So, some way towards the opposite end of the spectrum, we find the new institutionalist and constructivist who insist on more precisely specified and contextually specific assumptions. So, there are a suggested or respected analyzation in terms of imposing political analysis writing regarding to these two modern approaches, which is the inductive and deductive approach about the parsimony and complexity trade-off. And before we end this discussion, let me share to you the summary of the parsimony versus complexity trade-off. The explanation of Sethi and Somanathan is a good example of a parsimonious theory of collective action on the commons. It explicitly lays out the assumptions of the model and how these depart from prior models and makes predictions about cooperative equilibria and when this will occur or possibly occur. So it starts with the classic question, what makes cooperation in the commons more likely? One way to produce cooperation in traditional models of self-interested behavior is to make resource extraction a repeated game where the future matters. That's all. Thank you for listening.